Okay, so today we're going to do the first of our video lectures, I guess. We're going to start here with the endocrine system. Now, the endocrine system is the second of these so-called systems of control, right? We talked about the nervous system before the break, and basically the idea there being, of course, that our signals come in to the brain, signals come out of the brain. We have communication kind of point to point. Right, the whole labeled lines theory with the sensory stuff. Our skeletal muscles, for example, are also, again, very, very much point to point from brain to individual muscle fiber, all of that kind of stuff, right? Very much rapid A to B kind of communication. The other big system of control, the endocrine system, which is where we're starting today, is very much not like that. It is very much more kind of slow and general, in the sense that an endocrine signal can actually touch every cell in the body. And in fact, some of them do. Or they can be relatively specific, right? But it's not going to be an A to B kind of a thing, right? It will eventually get there, but it's going to sometimes take a very circuitous route to get there. And the reason for that is that the endocrine system, unlike the, I'll get this to work here. Okay. Unlike the nervous system, like we see up here at the top, someone get my laser pointer. Okay, and then we see up here at the top, the nervous system is from one end of a neuron to another, and whatever cell is on the other side of that synapse is where we're going to go. With the endocrine system, what's going to happen is we're still going to rely on a chemical messenger, right? So we have a neurotransmitter here in the nervous system. Here in the endocrine system, we have a hormone, but that hormone gets dumped into the blood, okay? And the blood, while again, the bloodstream does go to almost every cell in the body. There are, of course, exceptions to that, things like your cornea, cartilage, epithelia, stuff like that. But it doesn't go point to point, right? It's not like you get on the subway and you go from this station to that station. It's you get on, and wherever the bus driver feels like going that day is where you're going to go. So eventually we will get to the cells that we're going for, but sometimes it can take a long time. And so the way that we make sure then that as we pass by all of these cells that we may or may not actually want to communicate with, the way in which we make sure a hormone is specific to just those cells, and again, it can be every cell or it can be just a small handful of cells, is by relying on receptors. Now, sometimes these receptor proteins are going to be on the cell membrane. Sometimes they're going to be inside the cell itself. And that's going to depend entirely on the kind of hormone that we're going to deal with. That's the next couple of slides here. Now, where things get a little fuzzy is when we start talking about neurosecretory cells. So there are places, particularly in the hypothalamus, where we have neurons, okay, so parts of the nervous system, but are actually playing a role in the endocrine system. When they release their chemical messenger, right, it would be a neurotransmitter if there was a synapse. But because there's no synapse, this chemical messenger gets dumped into the blood and thus acts as a hormone. So again, the key difference here between neurotransmitter and hormone is where does it go, right? It's not what kind of a chemical is it. It's not what does it do. It's simply where does it go, okay? And so we can find that there are going to be cases where there are neurons that are involved in the endocrine system. There are a handful of other kinds of chemical messenger systems here that we'll talk about that are not a part of the endocrine system. They're specifically not, but they're similar in a lot of different ways. And these are the paracrine, so para here meaning nearby, right? We talked about the parasympathetic nervous system being next door to the sympathetic nervous system. And the autocrine systems, and this auto here again means self, okay? So in both cases, we're going to release a chemical messenger into a fluid, in this case, the extracellular fluid or the interstitial fluid. A paracrine signal leaves the producing cell and goes to the neighbors, right? It goes to the ones that are nearby. An autocrine signal is released into the interstitial fluid, but actually comes back around, loops back, and affects and binds to the cell that released it in the first place. Okay, so here the auto meaning self, right? We're having some kind of a chemical messenger that's going to have an effect on that cell all by itself. Okay, so when it comes to the kinds of hormones that we're going to find, we're going to break them down kind of like we do with neurotransmitters into what the basic chemical structure is. And so some of these are going to be based around cholesterol, right, which is a fat, right? And so everything that's based around a cholesterol is going to be one class or another of what we're going to call a steroid hormone. And the beauty of a steroid hormone, of course, is that they can pass directly through a cell membrane without binding to a receptor. Now, they do still bind to a receptor protein. They're going to bind to a receptor inside of the cell, but they will pass directly into it. And so in this way, if we want to have a hormone that can potentially affect lots of different cells at once and make it very easy, a steroid is a good way to do that because there's no barrier to entry into the cell. And so these will be classes of things like aldosterone, and we'll talk about aldosterone here when we talk about the maintenance of blood pressure. So aldosterone is a hormone that is a part of a chain whereby the kidneys decide how much water goes back into the blood and how much of it goes into the urine. Related hormone here, cortisol, coming from the adrenal gland or the adrenal gland. This is a one that has anti-inflammatory properties. So you may have had injections of cortisol as a athlete at some point or another. And then, of course, also sex hormones. Things like testosterone, which is a male sex hormone, and estradiol, which is an estrogen or a female sex hormone, are both built on this cholesterol model. We also have peptide hormones or protein hormones. These are hormones built on chains of amino acids, right? They can be as short as 3 amino acids all the way up to 200. So human growth hormone, for example, is a chain of about 200 amino acids long. And these will be things like growth hormone, antidiuretics, insulin, things like that. Also a number of what we're going to call releasing hormones. These are hormones that are going to cause the release of other hormones, right? These are going to play a role in there as well. These protein hormones are produced at ribosomes, like all other polypeptides are made at a ribosome, and then they're stored and secreted on demand. This is going to be a difference between how peptide hormones and steroid hormones work, and that steroid hormones are produced on demand, whereas peptide hormones, protein hormones, are stored and then released on demand. We've got a handful of other things here. So we've got some amines, which are a class of amino acid type hormones. Things like tryptophan, melatonin, you might be familiar with, norepinephrine and epinephrine, things we talked about before. We talked about the nervous system, dopamine. I'm not overly worried about you remembering which ones are catecholamines and which ones are iodothyronines or thyroid hormones. These are thyroid hormones. Or melatonin, but remembering the names of them, I think, would be helpful. Okay, so on the next of these little lectures, we'll start talking about some organs, and we'll start with the, we're going to call the HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland. That's going to be controlling a lot of this activity.